Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the SKNIS Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus, a weekly program where we take a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, your government. Energy resilience and security is a key goal for the government of St. Kitts and Nevis as it transitions the Twin Island Federation into a sustainable island state. Minister responsible for energy, the Honorable Konris Maynard, has been at the forefront of driving innovative energy solutions for St. Kitts and Nevis, and today we'll be discussing the ongoing upgrades and functions of our power station, the growing importance of renewable energy, and how these developments are shaping our energy security. We'll also take a closer look at a recent OECS Ministers of Energy meeting held at the St. Kitts Marriott Resort and how its impact will impact or how the outcomes will impact St. Kitts and Nevis and also our region. With us today to discuss these matters is the Honorable Konris Maynard. Stay with us for InFocus. It's your government, your business.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Welcome back to InFocus, and allow me now to welcome back to our program the Honorable Konris Maynard, Minister of Energy, Public Infrastructure, and a host of other things. Minister, welcome to InFocus.
Thank you for having me, as always.
And of course, I mentioned energy because, of course, we're going to take a bit of a focus of that. We appreciate, of course, that the world is celebrating World Water Day this week on March 22nd it is, and we'll give you a bit of a time to discuss water as well too, but we want to talk specifically about energy today, if that's okay with you. Mm-hmm. Let's start, Minister, with a general outlook of the power generation here in St. Kitts and Nevis. What is being done to stabilize and improve power generation?
Right, so thank you for that. I think it's important first to understand where we were and where we are trying to get to and where we are presently. We met a situation where the electricity company, SKNIS, only had enough generation capacity to barely meet the demand. It meant then that if any one of the generators went down for any reason, there would need to be load shedding because we did not meet any attempt to improve the fixed capacity infrastructure at the power station, which was unfortunate, of course. No power station should be operating where if a generator goes down, it is unable to provide power. And so, I want to take this opportunity to clarify some things I've heard about that particular decision that was made not to invest in fixed capacity generation. Some people argue that you should be completely turning to renewables. And they go further to say, if you had a solar plant, even with battery, then you wouldn't need to improve your infrastructure. I want to dispel that notion completely. For a solar farm, for instance, the one that was proposed, it would produce energy for about, let's say, 12 hours on average. Some from solar, some from battery. If we have a demand of, let's say, 30 megawatts, and let us say that that provides 15 megawatts of power for 12 hours, then your generators then only need to provide 15 megawatts. But what happens to the other 12 hours that there is no sun and there is no battery left, you still need a generating plant to produce all the power you need. And so you can't focus just on improving your renewable energy offtake through solar and battery and not have the capacity to run your entire grid with backup when there is no renewable energy. So that was a fundamental error in judgment previously, to think that you should pursue only your renewable energy uptake and not keep your plant up to standard. And so what we had was a degrading plant that was unable to meet the demand plus excess, such that when we need to take a generator out, persons are not affected. So we had to do a number of things to stabilize. One, we immediately bought some more generators, which are really temporary generators, because those are the ones you can procure fastest. Generators that are fixed capacity, they take a very long time to procure. They are very specific. They're made to order, etc. At least 12 months just from an order of the generator itself to get it in. You have the civil works that is associated with it. You have to house it and all of those things. You have to make the appropriate interconnection with your grid. The generators generate at a particular frequency and voltage. You have to change that, and you have to put in all the infrastructure for that. Whereas containerized units, they come there for temporary use, but they can augment your system. So we had to do that in order to provide some support to the system immediately. The other thing that we had to do, and what SKNIS realized, is, look, we have all of these aged generators, 30, 25 years old. They've been running for far too long. They need a rest, just like our bodies need to take a rest, regenerate. Same thing with the generators. They can't run forever. But they had no ability to do that, because if they took them off,
below the capacity,
then we have to load shed.
Right.
So they advised SKNIS that we need to go into an agreement to rent a temporary power station to afford us the opportunity to take those generators offline to be able to service them. And I'm pleased to report from the reports I've gotten from SKNIS that that is going well, where they're able to have the temporary facility, they're able to service some of the generators, and that is ongoing, and we hope to bring back on some generators online and take others offline so that they could be serviced.
Do you have an estimate? And it's a tricky question, of course, because each generator has their specific needs based on especially age and when they were produced. But is there a specific general time when an average generator has to be offline in order for it to be serviced?
Yes, they do have those. I don't know. Each generator will be different, but they're working hours. So I can't tell you how much the working hours are for a generator. But after a certain amount of hours of operation, the generator has to be taken out of service. And oftentimes when you're doing an overhaul, which what happens is that you disassemble many parts of the generator, and you effectively almost rebuild them to get access to all of the seals and all of the everything, etc. So it's an extensive process. So it's not as if you take it off today, fix it, and it's back on tomorrow. It literally takes months for when you take a generator out of service to break it down, go through all of it, and rebuild it. Right. So after a certain amount of hours for each specific type of generator, it comes offline. Then it goes into servicing and maintenance, overhaul by all the different parts and so on, put it back together and put it on. That is why a power station always needs to have excess capacity.
Right. Okay. So, Minister, you referred to, of course, the temporary plant that was commissioned back in 2024. It's essentially 6 months later, we have to ask about the impact of that. How has it been functioning?
Well, I mean, people can obviously tell as well, knock wood, we haven't had any major extended periods of large outages, even while some generators are taken offline. So what this has allowed SKNIS to do is to take important generators offline and get them serviced. I will tell you, the day that the temporary plant went on, which was 6 megawatts of power, the next day, the 6 megawatt generator in the power station failed. The next day. But the population did not realize, because you had the temporary station in place already, right? I don't know if the generator say, okay, we all bring somebody here now, I'm going to take my rest. But literally the next day, I was surprised when they told me that. So they were able to then immediately do that.
And if those were not in place, then load shedding.
You would have to have load shedding. And 6 megawatts is a lot. 6 megawatts is, our peak is under 30, maybe 28 or thereabout. So 6 megawatts is a significant amount of our overall amount. So if a size of that generator comes off and you don't replace it, it means that 20% of your customers have to then suffer. Right. So it has been able to stabilize such that frequent outages are now mainly due to maintenance, meaning taking off areas to do maintenance, as is always. They send out their maintenance issues. But it's still a struggle, because even with the 6 megawatts out, and a 6 megawatts is offline, it means nothing else can go out. So it is still a struggle, and that is why I guess, which we will talk about, the improvements that are coming are so very critical.
Right. So then is there, based on what you're explaining, is there plans to have another temporary plant commissioned?
Well, not a temporary plant, a permanent plant. So we are in the process of upgrading the facility to get a permanent plant of 18 megawatts worth of power.
Okay. So tell us, can you delve a bit in terms of, given the importance of the 6 megawatt temporary plant, how much that is costing taxpayers? Right.
So I think, if I recall correctly, it's about $10 million over a year, right, in the first instance. So that's, you do your calculations to work out how much that is a month. But in reality, it costs maybe $8 to $10 million to just run the plant every month, right? Buying fuel and all of those things. So it is a smaller cost in terms of the overall operating cost of SKNIS. And that is the cost you have to pay to be able to effect the improvements that you need. So the case was really straightforward when brought. There was one way to deal with it. You could have increased tariffs on the price, or you can support SKNIS to be able to do their transition. So it was important for us to do that.
And of course, as you mentioned, the economic cost has to be factored in, because the next day, the 6 megawatt went down.
Correct.
So that was the, and so if that was not in place, the temporary plant was not in place, then you would have businesses and homes being affected by the load shedding that would have had to come.
For extended periods of time, which of course has a severe multiplier effect.
Right, and then the government...
And by the way, it's important to note that this was a procured project. So it was procured worldwide. And so all companies were able to bid, and that process went through. SKNIS is responsible for that. That's not part of the government purview. SKNIS is responsible for that procurement process, and this was a company which is a very reputable company around the world. I think they're based in UK, if I'm not mistaken, and they are experts in providing temporary solutions like this.
Right. Okay, Minister, so you spoke about the expansion of the plant, and of course, it was mentioned back in April 2024 about acquiring some new generators, 18 megawatt dual fuel generators. What's the nature of that project? How is that going?
Right. So this is a very, very important project, because it means then that we will upgrade our power station by 18 megawatts, which means then that we're going to have the space to have that excess we need for if the power station goes down, to have the excess when your renewable energy is not on board, and to have the space to be able to service those generators that need servicing, and removing those old generators that no longer should be in operation. But if we remove 6 megawatts and replace it with 18 megawatts, you see that we've covered all that we need to do. That project is going smoothly. As folks would know, I had made representation on behalf of the government to the Saudi Fund for Development to push this project as one that they can partner with us. And they did approve that, and now we are well into the process of developing that plant. As you know, with any type of agency as serious as a Saudi Fund for Development, there are very strict procedural guidelines of how to go from beginning to end. So the first phase was to establish a RFP to identify the consultant who will manage the project. That consultant will, of course, be responsible for getting the designs and everything that is needed, all of that information, to then put out another RFP to get the actual generators and the civil works associated
and
with
just RFP would be request for
proposal.
A proposal, okay.
Right? So the first part has been completed, meaning the RFP process went out, and this was again worldwide, in Saudi Arabia, and so on, etc., to identify the consultant. I am advised that the bids have been closed, or the bid period has been closed. Persons would have put in their bids. They're at the evaluation stage, and over the coming weeks, that consultant will then be engaged to then do the next portion of the RFP. This is the part to actually get the generator by later down in this year. So it is going smoothly. It is going on time. I want to commend SKNIS for taking this on, and I want to also thank the Saudi Fund for Development for partnering us, because there are favorable terms. During this process, we don't pay anything. We won't have to pay anything until it's actually up and running and actually be able to generate revenue. So these are very good terms for us to be operating under.
And the importance of it being dual fuel, that it's powered also by liquid natural gas.
Right.
Talk to us about the importance of having that.
Right. So we have made a requirement that as we transition to renewable energy, we also have to be prudent in that transition, because we can take a decision that we're going to just remain with the usual heavier fuels like diesel. Or we can transition to what are termed as maybe safer forms of fossil fuels like LNG. They burn cleaner and they are a bit more efficient in how they operate. And so we have mandated or requested that the generators are dual fuel to meet our transition needs of being more responsible, as it refers to how we treat our climate and the environment. So LNG offers that opportunity where we can have a transitionary fuel as we go from the more heavier fuels to no fuel at all. And this means that those generators will be able to use LNG. And so once we are at a stage where we believe it's important to build the infrastructure to house LNG here, then we have an offtake of that LNG through these generators.
Right. Okay, and of course, when that plant is commissioned, then we will see the decommissioning of the temporary plant, because as you mentioned, it's providing 6 megawatts, this will provide 18.
Right. Now, the decommissioning of the temporary plant may happen before the 18 megawatt, because the temporary plant is also there to afford us the opportunity to bring other generators that have been largely out of service back in service. So once, and the time frames for those, may shift, because as I indicated, that 6 megawatt that went down, it wasn't intended to be part of the schedule at that time. So just by that going down, pushed back the overhaul schedule of the other systems. But the reason for the temporary supply is to allow for there to be that overhauling of those gensets. So once that is successful, whether it finishes, we anticipate it's not going to finish within a year, because as I said, it takes months and months just to get a generator going. So we anticipate at least 1 year. But anytime thereafter, once we are at the stage where we have refurbished enough of our generators, even if we don't have the permanent plant, then we will move on from the temporary supply.
And that's important to know. And talk to us, Minister, about then in terms of this labor force that is there. Of course, they have to be upskilled. They have to be trained in dealing with the LNG and other aspects that is being taken, that is coming on stream here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Right, of course. And that's a constant practice at SKNIS for training. And supported. I know that this staff is involved in a number of those things. And as we evolve in terms of the technologies that we're using, the requisite training will come along with that. So that is understood and that is highly supported, so that we have the capacity. And there are other areas, there are other programs that exist that allows for us to improve or build capacity among our technical folks, which the ministry continues to make available where applicable.
Minister, you also mentioned recently, you spoke about some smart meters, some new smart meters that are going to be introduced into St. Kitts and Nevis. Tell us a bit, well, I would say St. Kitts, because of course, St. Kitts and Nevis, it's one federation,
yes.
But SKNIS is responsible for St. Kitts.
Correct.
Tell us a bit about how that will work, the new smart meters, and also if there are any other artificial intelligence tools or any other type of technology that will be introduced to help to increase efficiencies to SKNIS and power generation.
Right, so the AMI meters, we'll call them smart meters for now. I can report that I believe the first batch are on island, maybe at least about 5,000 of them. And SKNIS advises me that they should start implementation in the month of May. What these will allow is, as you could imagine, improving the efficiency of operation of SKNIS, both from the SKNIS side and also from the consumer side. So SKNIS will now be able to collect data and information from every single meter, every 15 minutes of every day of the year. So immediately we will know, or rather SKNIS will know, what the power quality is in a particular area. So even before it happens, in a particular area, if all of the meters are registering that there is a phase issue, or there is a low voltage issue, SKNIS will be able to know that immediately. So these meters give SKNIS the ability to properly manage their distribution network such that they can optimize and make more efficient their operations. That is critical. Right now, sometimes you have to wait until a fault happens to know what is going on. These will give them all the information they need. It also will facilitate users being able to track their own usage, right? Be able to see how much power they're using and for what they'll be able to visualize it by the interface that will be eventually provided. So that, for instance, if you choose to be, for instance, a prepaid customer, or if you have to be a prepaid customer, you will be able to see I can put $20 down, and $20 will last me this amount of time, or I'll be able to put $100 down and this will last me for a certain amount of time. You'll be able to better manage how you use the power. Look at, okay, tonight I'm going to leave on the lights. I'm going to see how my bill moves. Tomorrow I'm going to take off the lights and see how my bill drops down, or my usage drops down. I think it has those capabilities.
Or even better, I'm going to unplug my microwave, which I'm not using. I'm going to unplug the chargers that are plugged in that I'm not using.
And they use a lot of electricity. A lot of persons don't realize that anything that remains plugged in, anything that, because I don't want to get too technical here, but there is obviously, we have 120 voltage. Your phones and so on, they don't use 120. So that has to be converted. There is energy needed to convert that. So even when your charger is not plugged to your phone, it is doing work once it is plugged in. And all of those plugged in over time, they add up. Even if it's a little bit here. So your chargers, your strips, anything, your monitors that are on screensaver, whatever it is, they're all using electricity once they're plugged in.
Okay, certainly interesting to know. Any other AI tools that will be introduced into the power plant?
Well, what SKNIS is advising is that this is the first stage of capturing the data, because it is important to have the data for AI to be able to manipulate that data. So over the next couple of months, the installation of the meters are going to advise or to inform SKNIS as to where do we need to go next. Additionally, as we get into renewable energy production and it going onto the grid, there's going to be a need for a control center that is able to manage all of this input into the grid. because the grid always needs stabilizing. So if we have renewable energy sources, say that are coming from, as the other part I was going to say about the smart meters, it's going to allow for persons to connect their renewable energy from their home onto the grid, and we're able to properly track that so people can be properly billed for it. SKNIS will then be able to show, okay, well, right now the sun is very hot and I'm getting X amount of kilowatts or megawatts onto our system because they can see what is happening on these meters. Then SKNIS will then make a decision, or a tool will be able to make a decision, shut down generator 1, because we now have an additional 5 megawatts on the system. We have some battery over there that will allow us to slowly ramp up, and the battery will allow us to slowly ramp down. And when a cloud cover comes for an extended period of time, a signal will be then sent to the generator, start back up, so that you can augment that. So with these meters, you're able to now collect that information. And then as we go into renewable energy and we set up a control center, tools will be there that can maximize the efficiency of power generation and distribution.
Sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
All right. So we want to talk a bit now about the other aspects of renewable energy that will be introduced here in St. Kitts and Nevis. The solar one certainly is very exciting, but before we get into that, we're going to take our first break.
Okay.
All right. So stay with us, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
Our targets would be for by 2030 to have 50% of our energy demand to be covered by renewable sources. So right now the focus would be 50% by 2030 through solar PV utility scale. Then right behind that we would have the geothermal project coming to fruition, taking us over. So it's very possible that by between 2030 and 2035, St. Kitts and Nevis could be one of the first islands in the Caribbean to be run 100% off of renewable energy.
Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our discussion with the Minister responsible for energy here in St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honorable Konris Maynard. Minister, as we mentioned, we're going to talk a bit now about renewable energy, and persons who are watching this program would have just heard from Clement Williams. It was the voice of Mr. Williams. And for those listening on radio, and of course he is the General Manager at SKNIS, he spoke about the goal of having 50% of St. Kitts and Nevis power coming from renewables by 2030. Is that a realistic goal?
Well, that's a conservative number. You know, we are aiming for 100%, and it's possible. It's possible because of our size. One, we're now advanced in the geothermal process, where by May, the bids for the drillers will be received. Once they start their process, drilling can take maybe 6 or so months. So give that process a year. We're into 2026. Thereafter, you give yourself another 2 years or so. I'm throwing out some hypothetical situations to get a 30 megawatt plant going in 2 years. That takes you to 2028, let's say, on the outskirts. Still have another 2 years before you reach 2030.
Right.
At the same time, we are going to already be advanced in our solar energy production. We are, at present, SKNIS is preparing to go out to market to confirm the next project for solar and battery power, including discussions with our partners like the Taiwanese and others for similar projects. So it is entirely possible that by 2030 we can still reach 100% renewable energy production. However, it is good to be conservative, so 50% is a good conservative mark, and will still be higher than most persons will be trying to get. But my guess is, under normal circumstances, we will meet the 2030 goal of 50%, but more importantly, I think we have a shot, which is the real vision, to get to 100% by 2030.
Now, of course, the federal government has taken a very active role in pushing forward the development of geothermal, and of course it's located on it's on Nevis, that will be the sister island, and there. And we also would have seen a joint meeting with the federal cabinet and members of the Nevis Island administration. That was on Tuesday, I believe it was.
On Monday.
Right, I'm losing track of the days. I imagine geothermal was discussed as well too. You mentioned that there are drillers. Tell us a bit about where the process stands right now.
Right. So, firstly, I want to maybe start with the very important fact that the reason we are making tremendous stride in the geothermal discussion and implementation is because of the political will that exists on the government side of the federal parliament and on the opposition side of the federal parliament. If there is one issue in this federation which the leader of the opposition, the prime minister, and the government have no daylight between them, is this issue. And upon taking the administration, the prime minister, with the support of the cabinet and with my support in the Ministry of Energy, we agreed to move forward in a unified effort to realize the tremendous and extraordinary potential of geothermal. So we signed off on a facility that allows the CDB to provide a contingently recoverable grant of about 16 million plus 1 million in technical resources, which means when you drill, if you find nothing, it's a grant. If you drill and you find and you produce power, it then becomes a concessionary loan. The challenge was that the 16 million was not enough. It was too small to mobilize these large drilling companies to come here to drill 2 or 3 holes in the earth, when they consider this to be a remote part of the world, right? And they have to come from extraordinary lengths, and logistically to get here is a challenge.
Ship the equipment as well too.
Absolutely. So we had to expand. So we had to seek further funding. This was an opportunity again, when first, of course, I had met with the Saudi fund for the NIDMOS expansion. And then the Prime Minister, again, with the support of the cabinet and the ministry, had the opportunity to visit Saudi Arabia in 2023, and took at that time the PS of energy in Nevis to be a part of that, to have discussions about the potential of partnering with geothermal. Subsequent to that, of course, we would have had, as a ministry, and I as minister, would have had a dialogue with the Saudi fund at COP28 in Dubai, where we presented the proposal in detail. Arrangements were made for the Saudi fund to come here, hosted by our ministry, of course, to get first-hand experience as to what was happening with geothermal. They came, of course, to St. Kitts and also to Nevis. The Premier's office and the Ministry of Energy in Nevis and the Nevis Electricity Company were all involved. They would have been instrumental, that is NEVLEC, in preparing the technical requirements of the fund to be able to lobby and apply for assistance. And we are pleased to report, as the Prime Minister and I think the Premier would have reported, that the Saudi Fund for Development has approved further assistance for the drilling of the geothermal wells in St. Kitts. In Nevis, sorry.
Right.
Which means, though, that we have the capital needed to drill at least the first 5 wells. And we are discussing even now how we can carry that up even to 9, since we're going to have since we're going to have them on the ground,
right.
And it's a very difficult thing to get them here. We need to drill as many wells as we possibly can. So we are at the stage now where as I mentioned, the bid is going to close in May for the drillers to be able to drill for the geothermal. That will mean that in a couple of months after that, once the bids has come in and they're responsive, we will then have the ability to start drilling for geothermal. The part of the question was, I hope I'm not missing the main part of the question.
No, well, I was asking for an update on how that will
right,
work.
how
where
is,
we are with the update.
How,
with the
right, so we're going. So that is where we are in terms of now. They've had pre-bid meetings. So the bidders have asked their question of the technical team led by NEVLEC. NEVLEC has already responded to those. Our partner, CDB, etc., is involved in terms of fine-tuning those things. And now it's going to be up to the bidders effectively to respond by the deadline, which is sometime in May. So we're looking forward to that. But I need to end on this, that I forgot one part of the political will. To show that we are serious, we went to Parliament to pass a resolution that the geothermal resource on Nevis is considered a federal asset which will get the federal support. It is not just the Nevis Island Administration thing. It's not just a NEVLEC. It's a whole of federation because it needs the federal support to move forward. These international agencies have not moved and will not move unless there is federal support. And so I want to commend the Prime Minister and I want to commend the Premier for having no daylight between them on this issue so that it affords us to move forward in the way that we need to move forward, to bring all the stakeholders together, to leverage all the support that we can to make this a reality. And more, each day, each week, each month, I'm feeling more optimistic about the chances of realizing the geothermal potential here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
And it's an important point that you made in terms of the funding arrangement, that if nothing is found, it's a concession, it's a grant.
Yes.
And if there's energy found and we can produce it, then it becomes a concessionary loan. That certainly is very important. So it shows that there's financial structure in place that would help to minimize the cost of such. And that's very important for persons to understand. And also a point that you made as well too, in terms of the Prime Minister traveling to Saudi Arabia, in terms of yourself making that presentation at COP, it shows that there must be that physical presence where
absolutely
we have persons who are basically controlling the purse strings internationally, who can help to bankroll some of the projects here in St. Kitts and Nevis to help us to develop, of course, help us to build that energy security that we speak about. That's very important to be there, to have those opportunities to engage with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so the Prime Minister went during, there was a CARICOM summit, and he took the opportunity to meet, of course, and speak on behalf of our federation. When I met with COP, I met with the Saudi Fund Development, who was at COP. I also met with the Saudi Fund for Development in Saudi Arabia. They then returned the favor, of course, and traveled here to have the dialogue here to evaluate and to assess the project. These interactions are absolutely crucial. Right now, we are having a GCF regional dialogue in St. Kitts right now at the moment. And the executive director of GCF, the Green Climate Fund, is in St. Kitts and Nevis, has taken the time to come here, which is just a regional dialogue. This is not a big summit, but has taken the initiative to come to St. Kitts and Nevis. That is significant. It shows that our voice is being heard on the international stage. It shows that the representation that we have made through the Ministry of Sustainable Development, through Dr. Joy Clark, through my ministry, of course, the Ministry of Energy, and through the Prime Minister's office is being heard, such that the largest and the most significant representatives in the climate world want to be present here to see and hear for themselves what our story is. And I had the opportunity yesterday to travel to Nevis again with the executive director of the GCF to see firsthand the potential and the sites for the geothermal. Presence is important. The Prime Minister says all the time that you have to have a seat at the table, or else you're going to be on the menu.
That's right.
Right? And so it is important for that engagement. We have seen success after success by being present. The agreement that we have with Saudi Fund is for a $40 million investment in the power station. We are looking at $20 million towards the geothermal. And if you're going to tell me that what is needed for that is a meeting on the moon, well, I'm going to try to get to the moon, as long as it doesn't cost as much to get to the moon to get the thing that it doesn't. Mm-hmm. But the point is, we have to be there. That is one of the things I found when we first started, is that when we engage some of these, when we are part of some of these conferences, we learned that there were other Caribbean countries, I'm not going to call their names, that were very present. Mm-hmm. And because they were very present, we saw the results of what they were getting. And we were wondering, well, why is this country getting a $40 million grant from the GCF? Why is this country getting a $20 million grant from the Adaptation Fund? Why is this happening? It's because they were present. And we can't understate that. And I want to commend the administration, especially the Ministry of Sustainable Development, for that outreach effort to make sure that our voice is heard and that we have options to advance our country.
Right, and I was going to ask you a bit about how the power will be integrated into the infrastructure, but I'm going to skip those for now. When things further advance, we can talk a bit, because we are running out of time here. But let's shift our attention then to solar power. Of course, you would have discussed it some during the initial talk when we were speaking about SKNIS, but talk to us about the 50 megawatt solar farms that, of course, was announced some time ago as well. So it was mentioned that the Republic of China, Taiwan is supposed to be a partner in that project.
Right. So right now there is actually a delegation in Taiwan led by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the energy transition manager from SKNIS is actually there. And one of the primary reasons for that is to finalize the framework arrangement of how we're going to partner, not only on a solar farm and battery energy storage facility, but also for our grid upgrade. So that is in discussion, and the details of how that looks, will come to the front in due time. But that is being worked out. But in addition to that, because we're not just looking at singular sources anymore, SKNIS is pursuing a process to invite the best in the world to present a proposal to have a solar battery energy project that will replace, in effect, the one that was not successful that we met and that the developers were unable to meet based on the guidelines or the deadlines that they had agreed to and the terms that they had agreed to. And so that process is now ongoing, where, with respect, I think that this is the appropriate way to do it. Our investigations and our interactions on the regional and international scene has always shown that if you go through a process of a proper RFP, where you have a proper institution who is regulating that, and people can respond to an RFP in a competitive bidding nature, the resultant is the client gets the best product. So right now they are developing, they have engaged the requisite world-renowned consultant. They're in the process of signing off on that. They went, as usual, SKNIS goes through their procurement process. It goes out to the world. People respond. They go through that evaluation. And there is a world-renowned consultant that is being engaged to develop the very detailed terms of what an RFP would look like. And then you will have potential bidders who will bid on that. And then that consultant will assist in determining whose project is fit for purpose for what we want in St. Kitts for this particular project. So that is ongoing, and we hope that process is already panned out. It's just scheduled out. It's going to take a few months to get to the point where you sign the next power purchase agreement. So it's within months, it's under a year. I'm hoping that by the end of the year, we can look to see where we are with having a finite start date of actual construction. But we're going to do it the right way. When you don't do things the right way, things happen. So we're using the experts in the world who have seen hundreds of projects, who have guided hundreds of projects around the world, to give us the proper advice on how and who to engage to ensure that we have the best project. And of course, ensuring that local investors and local and citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis have every opportunity to be a part of that process.
Right, and that's important for engaging diaspora, of course, letting them know about the investment opportunities that are here in St. Kitts and Nevis, because last week we had the chairman, the executive chairman for CBI here, and he spoke about that, having penetration investment, not just a one-time investment, but investing in different areas across St. Kitts and Nevis for its development. And also, I should mention, just a bit of backstory for the public, they may not be aware, but we spoke initially when we were going to have you on the program about having Mr. John Kelly here to join you to speak a bit about some of these upgrades. And Mr. Kelly is one who is also on the delegation to Taiwan, as you mentioned. And
specifically to deal with the framework of cooperation between Taiwan and the Ministry of Energy, by extension SKNIS, in the development of not only solar and battery energy storage, but our grid.
Right, and so that shows the importance again of international presence. And of course, that delegation is being led by the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, and of course, he is responsible also for investment. Okay, Minister, let's talk a bit now about some of the development of the economic opportunities that are going to come forward, because of course, these are new areas to St. Kitts and Nevis, and so there'll be opportunities for locals to become scaled in terms of maintaining and repairing these areas. What's the government plan there?
Right, you mean with respect to the energy transition?
Yes.
So let's start with the bigger ones first. If we have more energy, there are a number of things that are going to happen. One, we'll be able to have more water, right? Because the desal plant that we're building needs significant amount of energy, but we want it to be clean energy. If we have excess energy, we'll be able to either build more desal plants, drill more wells, and for instance, not only for residential and commercial needs, but for farming. So then you will have more food available. If you have more energy, then what is one of the critical elements that industries look for? Energy. They want cheap, accessible, and stable energy. So with more energy, it means that we can attract industries, whether it is manufacturing, and in the case of renewable energy, you can attract high-intensity industries, high-energy-intensive industries, such as the creation of ammonia, or the creation of green hydrogen, or data centers that burn a lot of energy. We can be a hub for that if we have the renewable energy available. So just imagine the jobs that are associated with just that I'm talking about. Not simply just the maintenance of the solar farm or the maintenance of the geothermal plant. It is the offspring opportunities that exist for our locals to be part of major industries and also in terms of agriculture. So those are some of the big things that can come out of energy. In fact, the IMF has effectively advised that energy can effectively transform the entire economy of St. Kitts and Nevis with the potential that we have. So that is why I want to again commend the administration led by the Prime Minister and the leader of opposition.
In this case, you'll be Premier of Nevis.
And who is the Premier of Nevis, right, for joining on this energy transition, because this is transformative. This can replace a number of the non-traditional revenue earners of St. Kitts and Nevis. I keep saying, when we were growing up, I was told that Trinidad had oil, Guyana had lumber and gold, Jamaica had bauxite. These places had natural resources. We were told that St. Kitts and Nevis ain't got no natural resources, we just have our people.
That's right.
But today we realize that we have significant natural resource in geothermal energy, in solar energy, in wind energy, and being a small island state, meaning we are a large ocean state, which means the potential of energy from the ocean also exists to us. And so our gold, our bauxite, our lumber is energy. And so we need to use it to transform our economy, just as others use their natural resources to transform their economies.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that because, of course, when the governor of the ECCB was here, he spoke about the fact of energy costs. So, for instance, in a hotel, the cost of energy here in St. Kitts and Nevis that the hotels have to pay, it's a lot cheaper in Mexico. And so they're able to have lower rates as well, too. But if your rates are lower, then you become even more competitive in the market.
Absolutely.
In tourism, as you mentioned, in factories, that would have been one of the concerns of foreign companies that operate here, the cost. And so it's really a spin-off effect that could really impact the people of St. Kitts.
So I continue to say that if you solve energy, you solve water. If you solve water, you solve food. If you solve energy, you solve industries. And if you solve industries, you solve salaries. Energy is the pin. Energy is the central point. If we get this right, we're going to transform this country.
The government also, Minister, as you mentioned, developed a feed-in tariff where persons, or should I say, households or companies that have renewable energy, whether it be from solar or other sources, are able to feed into the national grid. Tell us a bit about how that tariff is going to work.
Right. So very shortly, I've been hoping for a few months that this will be completed. It's not as yet because we're waiting finalization. But very shortly, persons will be able to engage SKNIS in an arrangement or agreement that they will provide renewable energy to the grid. They will have a rate. So, for instance, if you have a solar system on your house, you will sell the solar that you produce, and SKNIS will have a rate for that. You will then buy it from SKNIS as well. So you sell all of what you produce and you buy the remainder from SKNIS. It's like a wholesale retail situation. We want you to sell your energy wholesale to SKNIS, and SKNIS will then be able to retail that energy that you sell to all of its customers. So that's if you want to think about it like that. So that is, I'm hoping nearing completion very shortly that we can unveil that. And also timed with the installation, of course, of the smart meters.
Right. Of course. Now, Minister, we have just about 8 minutes left in our program, and I wanted to mention as well to ask you about the OECS Council of Ministers who met here in St. Kitts and Nevis in February. And just briefly, if you could give us some of the outcomes and how of that meeting and how it's going to help St. Kitts and Nevis, particularly as it relates to climate resilience and energy.
Right. So because of the limitation of time, there are a number of mandates that were given from that OECS meeting. I am presently the chair of the Council of Ministers for Energy in the OECS at the moment. And I'm using this opportunity, of course, to push the agenda of sustainability for all and our sustainable island state agenda. But what I have called for as the chairman is for the OECS Commission to develop what I am calling a green print. You know, you get a blueprint for a drawing and so on, a green print, which is a directive or a plan of how do we transition our OECS islands to green and sustainable energy sectors. So I've called for the establishment of a green print so that St. Kitts will know that its role is to develop X amount of geothermal, and we hope for interconnection between Antigua, St. Martin, and this. Dominica will know that its role is to develop 30 megawatts, and its interconnection is to Guadeloupe or to Martinique. St. Lucia will know the same thing. Grenada, everybody will know what their role is in creating what would be a regional framework for us to get energy independence. People say, oh, just go ahead by yourself oftentimes. The challenge with that is because of our size. We don't have the scale. So sometimes when we procure, for instance, it is easier to reach out to the best in the world who have the best services if we were to procure together. Let us say we were developing a solar farm. My solar farm in St. Kitts might be 50 megawatts, but across the ECCB or across the OECS, it might be 200 or 300 megawatts if we were procuring together. That would be much more attractive to the best in the world. And so this green print will pull all of these things together, our climate goals, our sustainable development goals, etc., so that from an OECS level, we all know what role we have to play in the overall plan to move the OECS to sustainability.
Minister, as I mentioned earlier, of course, St. Kitts and Nevis will be observing World Water Day on March 22nd, and of course there are a number of activities that the Water Department is having. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity, Minister, as of course you speak about solar energy. There are 2 desalination plants that are going to be built here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and they're well advanced, and perhaps I'll give you the opportunity to speak to them about it, but tell us a bit about the efforts of building those desalination plants and also to transform water here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and there's just about 5 minutes left.
Right, so we entered into an arrangement with the UAE to develop two desalination plants, one on Nevis, one on St. Kitts. They are powered by solar energy. So if you have an opportunity and you go over by the Canada industrial area, you will see that there exists a desalination plant that is actually powered by solar energy. Similarly, same thing in Nevis. I haven't visited the one in Nevis as yet, but I'm supposed to be there on Thursday, so maybe I'll get a chance because we're doing our water tour. So that is already in existence, but it underscores our thrust to ensure that everything we're doing, we're trying to make sure that it is sustainable. That is why we're twinning, although we're building the desal plant, the 2 million gallon desal plant, we're building that knowing full well that we intend to also have renewable energy to put in the grid that will supply that. So this is an excellent way to show what I said before. If we're able to solve energy, then we're able to solve water. We need affordable energy to be able to produce water, or else the cost of water would have to then be much higher. And we don't want to do that. Although we are paying historically low rates. I told the Prime Minister of Barbados the other day what our rates are and the rest of the region, and believe you me, we are paying extraordinarily low rates. The rates have not changed for 2001. So obviously we need to evaluate that because we still need to pay for at least what we are doing. But good low-cost energy through solar is important for desalination. And I want to, take this opportunity with respect to World Water Week to encourage a couple of things. The government is doing what it needs to do. We are building a 2 million gallon desal plant for Bastille. We are commissioning a 70,000 gallon desal plant in Canada industrial site. We are presently doing geophysical surveys around the island to identify new water wells or aquifers that we can tap into, and getting ready to drill even more wells. We have an agenda to bring this water crisis under control within the next 12, maximum 24 months. So we are doing what we need to do with the resources that we have. We have a project before the GCF for a $45 million grant through the GCF for our trans water project, transforming water in our country. We're doing what we need to do. That is has passed the project, is at the project preparation stage. It is with the experts, the regional experts, to advise us on how we go about doing that. We're doing our part as much as we possibly can. Of course, with advice where necessary to even improve further. We are asking for the public to do their part as well. I'm making an urgent appeal that we do everything we can to conserve the water that we have. I am pleading to you. One of the biggest areas that we lose water is through our toilets. Go and look at your toilet. If you see any drip in your toilet, it means that you're contributing to significant loss. We lose hundreds of thousands of gallons just through leaky toilets. And if you think that 10 gallons from you is not a problem, okay. But if you multiply 10 gallons by 20,000 households, you're talking 200,000 gallons a day that we're wasting through toilets and through our septic tanks. So I'm encouraging everyone to please conserve water. Water is life, and every drop counts. When you're washing your vehicle, yes, we know you have to wash your vehicle. We haven't put a ban on it. Some countries put bans on those kind of things. Right here in our region, we're saying use a bucket, and when you have to spray off the water, you spray off the water, but you take back off the water. You don't leave it running. When you're brushing your teeth, if everybody saves 1 gallon when they brush their teeth, that is 50,000 gallons you have saved in a day. Just by you saving 1 gallon, you've saved 50,000 gallons. If everybody, because everybody got to brush their teeth except the 6-month-olds, right? So 50,000 we will save by you saving 1 gallon. If you bathe 20% of the time less, meaning let's say you use 10 gallons to bathe, and you save 2 gallons, it's 2 gallons times 50,000, that's 100,000 gallons a day you have saved. we are asking for the corporation. And also, of course, to pay your water bills so that the water department and the government can have the resources to develop the infrastructure. There are too many people who are not paying their bills, and there are many persons who are. It is really unfair to them and unfair to the system when especially the water rates are as they are. Right? They are not exorbitant, and if you have any challenges with paying your bill, go into the Water Services Department and explain your financial situation, and they will be willing to set up what is called a deferred financial arrangement, where you can say how you wish to pay your arrears.
Right, and Minister, if I can join you as well to one of the things that I see is that persons, when they wash dishes, they have the water running. Get a container and fill the water, and you can do that and also save. And also, some persons, they, in terms of paying their bills, they figure it's a small amount and they let it go over, and then it gets out of hand, and that's where the problem comes in.
Right, definitely. Please, don't let us have to use exorbitant tariffs to instruct or guide usage.
Right.
We want tariffs to reflect that those who conserve will pay a good price. Those who waste will have to pay a price for that.
A good point to leave it on, Minister. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of InFocus.
Thank you very much.
I would like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us for this edition. We trust that you'll join us next week at the same place, at the same time, for another edition of InFocus. Remember, it's your government, your business. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.